I regard Alibaba as one of the worst mistakes I ever made.
Another question comes in from Brandon McKee. He's also asking about some of the situations with Alibaba. He said, how should investors view geopolitical events in regards to their investment in foreign countries? How do you look at the situation of the recent Chinese spy balloon in regards to the Alibaba investment?
Well, of course, it was a very interesting thing. Jack Ma was a dominant capitalist in Alibaba. And one day he got up and made a public speech where he basically said the Communist Party is full of malarkey. They don't know their ass from their elbow. They're no damn good, and I'm smart. And of course, the Communist Party didn't particularly like his speech. And pretty soon he just sort of disappeared from view for months on end. And now he's out of BYD. It was pretty stupid. It's like poking a bear in the nose with a sharp stick. It's not smart. And Jack Ma got way out of line by popping off the way he did to the Chinese government. And of course it hurt Alibaba. But I regard Alibaba as one of the worst mistakes I ever made. In thinking about Alibaba, I got charmed with the idea of their position on the Chinese internet. And I didn't stop to realize they're still a goddamn retailer. It's going to be a competitive business, the internet. It's not going to be a cakewalk for everybody.
It's coming in from Walnut Creek, California, who just said previously you stated that despite certain shortcomings, China was generally moving in the right direction. However, with the recent actions taken by the Chinese government, such as capriciously punishing technology and educational companies, declining to import effective COVID vaccines, escalating threats towards Taiwan, do you still maintain that China is a viable investment option for foreign capital, or is China experiencing a similar regression as Russia has seen under Putin's leadership that culminates in the invasion of Taiwan?
Well, that's a very good question, of course, but I would argue that the chances in a big confrontation from China have gone down, not up, because of what happened in the Ukraine. I think that the Chinese leader is a very smart, practical person. And it doesn't, Russia went into the Ukraine because it looked like a cakewalk. I don't think Taiwan looks like such a cakewalk anymore. I think it's off the table in China for a long, long time. And I think that helps the prospects of investors who invest in China. And the other thing that helps in terms of the China prospects are that you can buy better, stronger companies at a cheaper valuation in China than you can in the United States. So you're getting the extra risk can be worth running given the extra value you get. That's why we're in China. It isn't like we prefer being in some foreign country. Of course, I'd rather be in Los Angeles right next to my house. It'd be more convenient. But I can't find that many investments, right next to my house.
Writes in, how have political events in China over the last few months affected your thinking on the country? Several people, including me, were taken aback by the forceful withdrawal of former President Hu Jintao at the October 22 annual Congress. President Xi seems to have consolidated power, and his actions have indicated that he thinks very differently about the role of business in Chinese society.
Well, I have more optimism about the leader of the Chinese party than most people do. He's done a lot right, too. And he led a big anti-corruption drive. He's done a lot of things right. So, and I don't know where this man lives. Where is there a place where the government is perfect in a world of sin and sorrow? The democracies aren't that brilliantly run either. So it's natural to have some decisions made by government that don't work well. It's natural to have decisions in each individual life that don't work very well. We live in a world of sin, sorrow, and misdecision. That's what human beings get to cope with in their days of life. So I don't expect the world to be free of folly and mistakes and so forth. And I just hope I'm invested with people who have more good judgment than bad judgment. I don't know anybody who's right all the time.
And Keat from Cupertino, California writes in, and this is in the same vein but a little more focused, how should we think about the political climate around Taiwan and the long-term impact on the semiconductor industry? Specifically, do you see the CHIPS and Science Act favorably?
Well, the semiconductor industry is a very peculiar industry. In the semiconductor industry, you have to take all the money you've made, and with each new generation of chips, you throw in all the money you previously made. So it's compulsory reinvestment of everything if you want to stay in the game. Naturally, I hate a business like that. At Berkshire, we like a whole lot of surplus money to come in that we can do something else with. And of course, now, if you're enough ahead of it, like Taiwan Semiconductor is, that may be a good buy at these prices. It's not at all clear to me that they're not going to succeed mightily. But it's a difficult. It's a business with enormous promise for the big winner, but it's a difficult business in requiring everybody to keep increasing the bets on and on with all the money, and so it's not perfect, that semiconductor business. But remember when Intel owned the world? Intel was once the Taiwan semiconductor business of the world.
Yeah.
They invented the damn business, and they dominated it for decades. And Intel, it's not clear to me that Intel's going to have a very decent semiconductor business, getting as far behind as they are now. My answer is it's not so damn foolproof as it looked.
Even with the incentives to build plants here in the United States, like Intel is doing in Ohio?
Well, of course, that will really help. But they're borrowing the money. There's no indication the government is going to forgive the loans or something. It's not like the recent loans to business where they said, we'll loan you the money, and then it was a way of, keep the money. The government is not planning to do that with these new semiconductor loans. And so it's not a field where I feel I have a lot of expertise. What the hell do I know about semiconductors?
Do you worry about any conditions that the government would put on companies that end up using any of that money, with semiconductors or anything else?
Well, of course, all of that, it's deeply intertwined with government policies of both China and the United States. So I would rather have something that's more foolproof myself. But I do think Taiwan Semiconductor is the strongest semiconductor company on earth. So I am a big admirer of what they've achieved. It's just incredible of what they've achieved.
Speaking of things you like better,
and by the way, it may be a wonderful investment. The fact that I don't like it because I'm an old man and I don't like learning new tricks, that doesn't mean it isn't right for some younger person that understands it better than I do.
Okay, actually, I'm going to switch gears. We'll come back to this question in a minute, but that leads me to this question about crypto that Benjamin writes in. He says, in 2007 at the USC Law School, Charlie said, I'm not entitled to have an opinion on this subject unless I can state the arguments against my position better than the people who are supporting it. The question is, does this also apply to your Wall Street Journal article on banning cryptocurrencies? And if yes, would you care to share the arguments against your position?
Well, I don't think there are good arguments against my position. I think the people that oppose my position are idiots. And so I don't think there is a rational argument against my position. This is an incredible thing. Naturally, people like to run gambling casinos where other people lose. And the people who invented this crypto crapo which is my name for it. And sometimes I call it crypto crapo, and sometimes I call it, well, crypto shit. And it's just ridiculous that anybody would buy this stuff. And it isn't. You can think of hardly nothing on earth that has done more good to the human race than currency, national currencies. They were absolutely required to turn man from a goddamn successful ape into modern successful humans in human civilization. Because it enabled all these convenient exchanges. So if somebody says, I'm going to create something that sort of replaces the national currency, it's like saying I'm going to replace the national air. You know, it's asinine. It isn't even slightly stupid. It's massively stupid. And of course, it's very dangerous. And of course, the governments were totally wrong to permit it. And of course, I'm not proud of my country for allowing this crap, what I call the crypto shit, it's worthless, it's no good, it's crazy, it'll do nothing but harm, it's antisocial to allow it. And the guy who made the correct decision on this is the Chinese leader. The Chinese leader took one look at crypto shit and he says, not in my China. And boom, there isn't any crypto shit in China. He's right and we're wrong.
Well,
and there is no good argument on the other side. I can't supply it.
So does that counter what you said back at USC? That you shouldn't have a position unless you can counter?
No, it isn't counter. I do think you ought to be able to state on a lot of issues. You ought to be, how big should the social safety net be? That's a place where reasonable minds can disagree. And you should be able to state the case on the other side about as well as the case you believe in. But when you're dealing with something as awful as crypto shit, it's just unspeakable. It's an absolute horror, and I'm ashamed of my country that so many people believe in this kind of crap, and that the government allows it to exist. It is totally, absolutely crazy, stupid gambling with enormous house odds for the people on the other side. And they cheat in addition to cheating in the betting. And it's just crazy. So that is something, there's only one correct answer for intelligent people there, is just totally avoid it. And avoid all the people that are promoting it.
How do you feel about the gambling that took place at the Super Bowl and surrounding that, and the legalized gambling taking place in this country at this point?
Well, it's not as bad as crypto shit. I don't think there's much harm in betting a modest amount you can afford on a Super Bowl game. That strikes me as pretty, particularly if you do it with a friend and not with a bookie. So I don't have the same feeling. I obviously don't think you should have a gambling compulsion to run around betting against odds. If you take all the money that I have bet against odds in my whole life, I don't think it's more than a few $1,000s.
Alan Che writes in, and he says,
I'm all in favor of betting with the odds.
With the odds, yeah. Alan Che writes in.
Yeah, sure.
He says, if Mr. Munger thinks that Bitcoin and Ethereum are rat poison, has he ever profited by shorting them?
No, I don't short. That isn't right. I have made 3 short sales in my entire life, and they're all more than 30 years ago. And one was a currency, and there were 2 stock trades. In the 2 stock trades, I made a big profit on one and made a big loss on the other, and they canceled out. And on my currency bet, I made $1 million, but it was a very irritating way to make $1 million. I've stopped.
Not worth the headache, I guess.
Well, you can laugh, but that's true. It was irritating.
Because you were worried?
Well, because they kept asking for more margin. I kept sending over treasury notes. It was very unpleasant. I made a profit in the end, but I never wanted to do it again.